Can we start with a recent trip to New York? Because from the outside, listing in US seems like a huge milestone, and just to see the video, of you guys ringing the bell must be a great team feeling. Can you just tell a bit about that trip? How does it feel to list in US, and also maybe the backdrop to listing the company in US?
The experience was, I expected less, to be honest. It was quite impressive being in there, and uh, it was an experience that I think we'll remember, and it was very nice to have. And it was nice an opportunity to be with, three or four people from who didn't work for OET, but were critical in it getting listed and raising the equity in the first round. And also three of our board members who've been with the company, since July 2018. So it's nice to get that group back together. Um, it was also nice that we have a lot of investor meetings as well in New York, and people are positive about the market, which is great. But even nicer is the investors we have invested with us are all happy, and it's quite easy to have meetings when the investors are happy and they feel like everything's been going well. So it was a very nice week in the States doing that. And the reason of listing in New York, I mean, there were multiple reasons. There's a tax efficiency for U.S. investors on dividends, so that they have lower tax if you're listed in the United States versus Oslo, and that's something that we wanted to offer to some of our U.S. shareholders. And then the other thing is that given that we believe, built a pretty strong track record in Norway with Norwegian investors and US or international investors who can invest in Norway, we thought it would be a prudent step to establish that track record in the United States with more retail and US focused only investors. Whether it's, to create more liquidity in OET and have better pricing, or in the future for a potential project even outside of OET and another listing that we do. So it's about growing the trust we have with the investors and hopefully increasing liquidity in the share and giving us optionality in the future.
I saw some stats that the liquidity has been quite impressive from the early onset, given you have now, entered the US market with a listing. Are there any trade-offs at all with listing, a dual listing, or only plus plus if you can handle the resources and all the documentation I can just imagine is required?
It's a lot of work. I mean, it at least came in January of last year, and for the next 12 months, his only focus almost was getting the listing through. So it took him and the team a lot of work, and they did a great job getting it done so quickly. No, it's resources, but there's no downsides to having both. I think we were lucky in terms of the liquidity that Q2 and Q3 of last year were both strong quarters, and as Q3 was finishing and Q4 was beginning, it seemed that the market was quite a bit weaker and that the shares were overvalued across the tanker space. So you saw a sell-off. And I think as December came in and we did the dual listing, the market picked up and improved. The Q1 looked more positive, and there was just a general interest to get back into shares. And all the tanker shares rallied from that point onwards. So I think we were lucky in the sense that there was an opportunity where people had interest to buy shares, and the US percentage of our liquidity grew pretty quickly. So against some of the case studies that we've looked at, the percentage of US trading is quite high compared to others. And we hope to keep improving that as well.
There's a local debate in Norway that, Norway is losing its way as an attractive platform for, broader investments. I don't know if it's a currency thing or many other, internal local policies, but you can see Norway from the outside. Do you see any shifts in momentum, building interesting platforms in Norway, or do you feel Norway still is a good place to be many years ahead? Or is that like a very difficult question to answer?
Well, no, I mean, I think that I'm not qualified like Soman Power, some of the other people who've made comments about this, but from my much more limited perspective, I feel like Norway is an excellent first, big step to do. So the investment community in Norway is similar to the Greek, like although you guys are more advanced, or let's say, um, can't think of the word right now, but that we act counter-cyclically. We can invest when it seems that there's no light at the end of the tunnel, that there's no cash flow to support the investment. And I think that's like a critical first step for launching new businesses. And the fact that in Norway, we listed OET in 3 or 4 months from the date we had the idea, and I called the S&P broker at Fernley's to put me in contact with a banker. You can't do that in the United States. And there's a depth in the community that you can raise money for these deals. So I think that Norway should remain a really important first step for launching new shipping or marine-related public equities.
That's good to hear. So from my personal experience, I was lucky enough to have your father on the podcast a couple of years ago. And then I have to admit, when I did the research about, the whole legacy you have built for, many, many years, I was also super impressed when I started to read about, your grandfather and his journey. And I just thought to myself, faced with adversity, going from one business to another business, going to a new country, setting up a shipping shop like he did in London. It's so impressive. And it's very hard to ask you one simple question, but do you have any reflections you can share for people who just want to understand a bit more about the legacy you have built? Because when people buy into your stock, your family history is also a very substantial piece of that story, because you're the main sponsor behind this company we're talking about today.
That is a tough question. I don't know. I mean, I think something that my father and my grandfather passed down is that, having trust and offering a reliable service, whether it's to charters or to investors, is like, it's one of the key elements in being successful over a long period of time. So whether it's how we operate commercially or internally or with our investors, I think that having the trust of the people against us and working hard, obviously, and being reliable in what you say and what you deliver are the key elements. And I appreciate that being handed down to me. I think another thing, especially this was my grandfather's view, and it's came all the way down to us, is that building your own ships and acting counter-cyclically and being patient pays off in the long run.